So my top 5 tips for fundraising. First one, get a strong introduction. So if you're looking to raise this, and this is mainly focused on raising money from, 5 tips, raising money from angel investors and venture capitalists, so professional investors. They have so many people who are trying to get their time, trying to meet them for coffee, trying to get investment from them, that they need to prioritize who they actually look at through some means. And the main filter that they have on who they're going to meet in order to raise money or look at raising money for the business is who's introduced them to the deal. So if it's someone that they already know, it's going to be much easier than some random person emailing them. I think most of the company's websites will have some form that you can submit a business plan through. I've never, ever heard of a company raising money through that route. You need to get introduced. And who can do that introduction? So this is kind of the order of who you should look to introducing you if you're looking to raise money from a professional investor. The best person to introduce you is another investor who's already invested in the round, because if they've invested, then it's pretty good proof that you must be worth thinking about. Obviously at the start, when you haven't got any investors, you can't do that. The second best one is an entrepreneur who's already been backed by the investor, because the investor will think, well, you know, he was a good entrepreneur, or she was a good entrepreneur, invested in them, they've got a cool startup. One of their friends is likely to be good too. Thirdly, lawyers or accountants. So their reputation is important in terms of getting customers. Their customers are likely to be the portfolio of the investors, and they don't want to make themselves look like an idiot. So if they can introduce you to an investor, which is quite easy, you can take that route. And then the worst one out of these, that like it's better than emailing cold, but your friend who met the investor for 5 minutes at some conference last year is not a good way to try and open the door with an investor. So try and do better than that. Tip number 2, which is maybe heresy in a management lecture theatre, is it's all about the deck, not the business plan in my experience. And by deck, I mean 10, 20 PowerPoint slides that present a snapshot of what your business is, what you're looking to do with it, what you're looking for from an investor. And typically you would, if you're looking to raise money, you'll run through that with an investor the first time you meet them for half an hour over coffee. And that's the key thing, that half an hour where you have the opportunity to capture their imagination, get them excited, and they'll be like 90% plus probably through the way of making their decision after that half an hour meeting. They'll either not be interested or they'll be hooked from that deck. The long 40, 50-page business plan might be helpful for you to think through your idea and think about it in a structured way thoroughly yourself. But investors, in the majority of cases, don't read them. In Silicon Valley, some of the investors that I approached when they found out that I'd written a business plan, laughed at me for poor time management and prioritization, because I'd clearly spent like a week or two writing a 40-page document instead of working on the product and getting users. So that's kind of the attitude that some people have. So how to do that? There's a good guide to how to create a PowerPoint presentation called the 10-20-30 rule by a guy called Guy Kawasaki, who is a venture capitalist over in Silicon Valley, well-respected speaker. And the 10-20-30 stands for 10 slides, no more than 20 minutes, and no less than size 30 font, because most professional investors are really old, have got glasses, and they've got rubbish eyesight, so you need to make sure the font's big for them to see it. So deck's really important. What do you include on those 10 slides? So I've ripped off a few slides from one of our investors, a guy called Dave McClure. And the best things to include on the 10 slides are to hit the 10 VC erogenous zones. Just take a moment to have a read through this. So very succinctly, with these 10 areas, you can tell an investor basically everything they need to know about your business. And if you nail it with these 10 things, you can really get them very interested very, very quickly. Now, when you're in the meeting, and I'm talking about this first time you meet an investor, which is, it really is the make or break. One of the most important parts, for a lot of people, investors interested in product, the most important part is the money shot, which is the pitch, basically. And it's about capturing an investor's imagination so that they really get themselves in the mind of the customers that you're targeting and can understand why what you're doing is really cool. And nothing tells that better than actually doing a demo and showing them how your product works. And be prepared for the demo to fail, you not to have Wi-Fi, the PowerPoint not to work, speak the devil. That stuff will happen. But you really need to get that nailed in that meeting. And if you can do that with the good slides, you're going to be well on the way. Something that doesn't get talked about a lot that investors really, really like, if you can tell them about it, is unfair advantage. So some sort of competitive advantage that, you can see the list up there, that you have with your idea, some revolutionary tech, or it might be that you've got some exclusive insight into the market. Often I think a lot of student startups will focus on the student market, and as students yourselves, you will have insights that you can argue are very difficult to acquire. They really like that. And another thing that I think people often screw up is talking about the competition. So it's not a good idea to say to investor, or even anyone who asks you about competition with your business, we don't have any competitors, because people will draw from that more that your idea is probably stupid if no one else is doing anything like it. Then you've magically come up with this thing that's completely different to anyone ever. So you want to list who your competitors are, but the important thing when you do that is to differentiate yourself well from them. So you can either say that you're better in a particular way, or that you're different, and while they look like a competitor, you're actually targeting an adjacent market, or there's something slightly different there. And if someone's very, very big, Dave's got this phrase, niche to win. So it might be that, for example, a company's targeting everyone in the world with a solution, but you're just doing it for the student market. And while they're doing really well, because you're specializing in students, you can win. And the way that you do that is using one of these cool little graphs. So usually you want to be high and to the right. So Dave really likes South Park. I do too. Whatever. And then just like your first date, leave it with a happy ending. Leave them wanting more. Don't give them everything on the first date. Leave them. Yeah. Yeah. Cool. So there's some fun tips from Dave McClure, who you can check out his blog at 500hats.com. He's just launched a venture fund, very early stage, called 500 Startups. Now, the last 3 tips on fundraising, so this is more logistical stuff. When you actually get going, you want to run a parallel process. What I mean by that is, if you're looking, say, to raise some angel investment just after you've graduated or coming up to that, you don't want to meet one investor after another and then leave too long a gap between those meetings, because in order to get a good deal, you want to have multiple people wanting to invest at the same time so that you can play them off against each other. And so you want to have ideally like all of your first meetings in 1 week, second meetings a couple of weeks later, and schedule them in a row. And the other thing that helps with is that you don't start getting talked about amongst the investor community as someone that they saw 3 weeks ago who they're not interested in, and bad words can get around. So you want to try and move as fast as possible and keep everyone in parallel. And when it comes to negotiation, the only way to negotiate your price up and your terms up when it comes to taking on investment is by having alternatives. And so those alternatives could be other investors, or the alternative could be that you don't actually need to raise money. You could just wait, and you've got ways you can bootstrap or things that you could do to continue running the business. And if you've got those alternatives, it will encourage you to be able to negotiate up. And my last tip is to read venturehacks.com, which is a really, really awesome site written by a couple of people who've raised a lot of venture capital themselves with startups, and talks about all the stuff I've covered and a lot more stuff to do with raising investment. Some really, really good articles on there. I certainly found it super helpful for raising money with GroupSpaces, and a fantastic resource answering all the sorts of questions you're going to have. So that summarizes the different resources that I've mentioned today you can make a note of. And I'll leave it open for questions.